from all over the world. And this time I get to come from the beach, which like hardly ever happens. So I'm super excited about this. We have Emily Murdoch and Kathleen Ayers and Lexi Post with us this week. Ladies, thanks for taking the time to talk.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Yeah, it's great.
So I was hoping that after we got done talking about the books, we could, because everybody writes to me, we could talk about the role of sex in the book. So let's get to the books right away so we can get to that part. So the first release this week is Lexi's book, and it's Uncovering the Lord, and it's book 1 in a new series. It's Courting the Curious Lady, and I love the setup for the series. Lexi, can you tell us about it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Basically, everything I write is inspired by classic literature. And since I'd already done Marrying a Mabry series, which was based on Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, of course, I had to move on to Little Men and Jo's Boys. And while in Louisa May Alcott's books, she started a school for boys, Plumfield, I had Joanna start a school for ladies of the peerage that tries to be like Oxford or Cambridge is for the men, which really wasn't done. And so they are the Curious Ladies. And this book is actually a second chance. If you read the first book, Stealing the Duke, from the Marrying a Mabry series, you see the whole background of the two characters in this book.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so you see the whole drama, the whole turning down his proposal and why, and you understand. So when these two characters, Elsbeth and Teddy, his name is Theodore, but everyone calls him Teddy, when they run into each other in, of all places, the Dragon Caves of Portugal.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So after she turned him down, of course, he went to the continent and, sowed his wild oats and was so upset and, finally get over. But actually, while he's over there, he ends up having a child and getting married. And so when she meets him, he's a completely changed man. She has grown a little bit, but not like he has. He's really changed. So this is a second chance for them, but he's not going to ask her again because she already turned him down.
Yeah, once bitten, twice shy.
Right, exactly. And as it turns out, the School for Curious Ladies, the mothers of the other ladies are threatening to take their daughters out because no one's getting married. So unless one lady marries by the end of the season, the school's going to be empty. And Elsbeth just can't stand that because she's seen what it's done for her friends, where she's always been brought up among books and intellectuals and all that. So she promises that she will marry by the end of the season. So now she's got this wonderful man who wasn't so wonderful before. Now he seems great, but he's not going to ask her to marry him because he already did. And she's like, okay, now I have to find somebody else. And they're stuck on a ship together on the way back to England from Portugal. So, things get interesting.
Forced proximity. We love forced proximity.
Oh, yeah, it kind of forces these things to happen. Yes. And to your point about what we'll talk about later, of course, lovely things happen on the ship, not only for my heroine, but for her mother.
Oh, yay.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's a twofer.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so this is book 1 in the series. How many books?
Well, who knows? In Louisa May Alcott's book, she had 12 boys and 3 girls, I think, at the school. We'll see. As long as the readers want me to continue writing them, I will. Elsbeth is actually modeled after Demi, who is the very kind of looked up to, even though he's not the oldest, and very kind. Everyone thinks he's going to be a priest. Turns out that he's going to be a journalist. Where Elsbeth studies geology. So she's actually in the Dragon Caves to study the stalagmites and all those things. So
I'm going to have to look up the Dragon Caves afterwards because I don't know.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, because when she went there were only 2 discovered. Now there's 4, which includes a lake, and they do a concert on the lake.
Okay, I think you need to tell us more because Kathleen doesn't know either. So tell us about the Dragon Caves.
Well, the Dragon Caves are in Mallorca, off of Spain. And I said Portugal. They actually get to Portugal later on. They're in Mallorca, off of Spain, and there are actually 4 caves. It's the largest underground lake in the world.
Oh wow!
And you go through. You can look up YouTube and go through the caves with people, and they do. They don't let you record the concert, but they actually have people come out on boats, and they have a piano on one boat, and they have a cello and string instruments on another boat. And then after the concert's done, then you get on boats and they bring you down the lake so you can go to the exit.
Oh my goodness! Oh, I
Very
bet the acoustics are amazing too.
Oh.
That's so much fun to play with.
See Kathleen just writing it down like on the bucket
I
list.
am writing it down.
I see you.
There's
I
lots of places she hasn't traveled to yet in the list.
There's, yep, I'm just getting started.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, that's so cool. Like the idea of caves and water is at the same time fascinating and terrifying.
Yes.
It's like because underwater, that's extra not breathing.
Right, exactly. The air thing's kind of important.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's so much to look forward to with this series. I can't wait for the rest of the books. And this is part of Dragonblade's Flame line, so it is steamy.
Okay.
So the next book that came out this week is Emily's book, and it's All Good Dukes Come to an End. And it's book 12 in the Dukes in Danger series.
What a title. I'm not going to lie. I loved writing the titles for these books. I had so
The
much fun.
titles for the series are great.
Oh, so yeah, this is book 12. And normally with my series, I say, pause the video, go, oh, that's my face. Thanks, Evelyn. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted on a... Brilliant. Yes, normally my series, you can read them in any order, and you can with this one. This is Dukes in Danger, book 12. However, I am going to put a caveat, because this is the last book of the series, we get a lot of cameos. And so I think if you're going to really love it and really kind of spot the people coming back and spot the clues and see people come back with babies, I think you'll enjoy it if you go back to book 1. Having said that, you can dive straight into book 12. You do you.
But it's
Book 12, this series is all about...
It's Kindle Unlimited, so there's no reason, there's no deterrent. Just go.
Right.
Chicklets, read them all.
Just dive in. Because this series, my Dukes in Danger series, is all about dukes who are bored. They have very little to do. They have no responsibility beyond the average. And so they go looking for danger. And depending on which book you go into, some of these dukes are brilliant at managing themselves in dangerous situations. And some, bless them, are just cinnamon rolls looking for a good time who have no idea what they're doing. This book, book 12, we have Adam Seymour. He's the Duke of Gilroyd. He is very much a man who knows what he's doing. He is a spy for the crown. And when we meet him, and this is not a spoiler because this happens long before we first meet Adam, he actually loses his wife in an incident in France. And he vows never to marry. He's deep in grief when this happens. And he decides that serving the crown is the only way to forget the pain that he has. Unfortunately, Mr. Smee, who is a recurring character, he is the intermediary between the crown and all of the dukes that end up helping the crown in this series. Not all of them, but they pop up every now and again. And he has a plan to root out a traitor in their midst. One of the characters you've met in this series is a traitor. Sorry, guys.
Man.
So it's now, This is what you can drop into this book 12, but I think you'll love it if you go back to book 1. So Mr. Smee is not convinced that Adam can do this on his own, and he wants to force a new partner on him, Yates. And Adam, he goes back and forth, but eventually agrees. Fine, Mr. Yates can join him, and the two of them will hunt on the traitor. And Mr. Smee says, "Great, here's Miss Yates."
I knew it was going to be that. I knew.
So Dottie Yates is not wholly enamored with Adam either, to be honest. But she needs a man to pretend to be her husband, preferably one with good connections, and she supposes a duke will do. So they're thrust into a fake marriage. They're spying in Brighton, which is a town that you don't see all the time in Regent's England, but I had a lot of fun kind of diving out there. Lots of misunderstandings, lots of tension, lots of heat, lots of passion, lots of confusion, lots of mistrust of each other because one of them could be the traitor. So there's a huge amount of joy and silliness, but as well as mystery and adventure. Does that give you a good enough view?
It did. How do you feel wrapping up the series?
Really sad.
I just need to give you a place to say that because
because all of my Dragonblade books exist in one world. So you will see books from you will see characters from the Duke of Axwick, my very, very first book, January 2020, will often host a ball in a very convenient time and location, or so you do see people pop up, but within a series they are very much all interconnected. They all know each other or are related in some way. They all pop up, and you just get to love them. And they're just some of them are very silly, big golden retriever energy heroes who are just bounding along going, I'll help. And the heroine being like, I don't need your help. Actually, I have discovered, actually, I'm the one who's in charge here. And I had a lot of fun with that. I think the joy of doing a series all about dukes, yes, as a historian, I'm fully aware having 12 dukes bopping about is unlikely, to say the least. But I think, I got to play with all the different types of hero. They were all dukes. They all had money and they all have power. But actually, even with that, you have people who are really, really shy, who are really introverted. You have really brash people. You have people who are brash because they're shy. You have people who love their country and want to serve. And you have people who actually are just looking for a really good time. And where is the nearest brothel exactly? And so it's been really fun to explore that in a series where they all know each other. And some of them don't like each other. And some of them are best buddies. And so saying goodbye to that cast of characters is going to be sad. However, it's never truly goodbye. They will pop. In fact, I had a note from my Dragonblade editor who was running through book 1 of my new series. And the Duke of Gilroyd is a part of that. And she goes, I know him. And I said, yes, that's exactly. This little poet, I know him. I said, that's exactly what I want my readers to experience. Of like, even though we're saying goodbye to these characters, they'll be back. They'll pop up. They'll host balls or card parties, or they'll be a cousin of someone. They're never quite going away.
Well, they become real, especially when you stay with them for that long period of time. And Jennifer Lynn Barnes did a bunch of research on our relationship with fictional characters and our relationship with real people. And when you stay with fictional characters that long, in your mind, they can become more real than the real person sitting next to you. So,
and you got to think that, we write these books weeks, usually months, sometimes years before they come out. So I like to write in batches. So I'll like dive into a series and write like crazy. And then it could be 14 months before that book comes out. So I've spent the last 3 years with all these characters and kind of navigating them and trying to keep them happy and arguing with them. And so to kind of go, right, all right, that door is now closed. It's quite surreal. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to the new series as well as
yes, book 1 is already
your way through this one if you haven't done it already. So.
Yes.
So the next book that came out this week is Kathleen's book, and it is Sinfully Wanton. I love the title of this.
It's tomorrow, actually. I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, it's tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be when this will air on
Friday.
It'll be the day that it airs. And it's 5 Deadly Sins, and this is the last book in the 5 Deadly Sins.
If I'd had more foresight, I might have named it 8 Deadly Sins, but I didn't. I named it 5 Deadly Sins, and so there's unfortunately it's the tale of the Sinclair family, and I set out to write a really different type of romance. All the characters are very quirky. The heroine in the first book, Simply Wed, she is a true crime enthusiast. She reads criminal broadsheets. She believes in supernatural characters. I mean, so they're all very different and very not your typical characters, which I wasn't sure was going to resonate, but as it turns out, Simply Wed just won an award. So apparently people
I saw that this morning. It's fantastic.
Thank you. And my giant man hands, but I don't know. It's my camera. I going back and forth. So Simply Wanton is the very last one in the book, and it's the youngest sister. She's the one that everybody has quote unquote sacrificed for. Oh, she wants to be a lady. She's finally gets to be the Earl's daughter that, it was denied for so long. She's going to have pretty dresses and dance lessons and all this and that. And Aurora is super, super excited about all that until she gets to her second season. And she's bored out of her mind. She's like, isn't there anything else? Is this it? So she has come in contact. At the heart of it, this is an age gap romance. Her brother's best friend and business partner, Charles Worthington, is a little bit of a rake. He's older than she is, and they were great friends. They played bowls together, cards. They did all this stuff until she made her debut. And then he stays completely away from her because he's attracted to her, but doesn't want to be because he's like, well, her brothers are going to beat me up. He's like, I promised it. And he has a very deep seated reason why he doesn't want to get married. right? And so, but Aurora is very determined, and at a garden party, she has a little bit too much to drink because she is the world's worst chaperone, Aunt Lottie, who is from all the books, right? And she's the dirty old lady. She's always admiring backsides and talking about shoulders and the whole bit. And she gets her own happily ever after. I had so many people write to me and say, "Oh, please tell me Aunt Lottie gets a happily ever after." And I'm like, she does. She caused a scandal. She's a spinster. I mean, she's a pretty wild old lady. So I kind of like to think if it was me back in the day, that's who I'd be. So she's a terrible chaperone, especially for someone like Aurora, who is so curious about things she shouldn't be curious about. And so she has too much to drink at a garden party, goes into she sees Worth. And of course, he keeps his distance from her, right? He treats her like a kid sister, which she hates. She kind of stumbles around a maze, gets lost, and finds him with one of his old lovers in the middle of the maze. So she hides because she wants to watch. But before anything happens, he literally turns around and gets rid of the other lady and goes right to the hedge where she's hiding and says, "I know you're in there." So she falls on top of him and she kisses him because she wants Worth. She's always wanted Worth, but he doesn't want anything to do with her. And so after that kiss, she tells him quite frankly, she says, "Well, my family is very scandalous," and they have been. They're called the Deadly Sins, right? And she says, "If you don't, quote unquote, tutor me or at least satisfy my curiosity, I'm going to go cause a scandal with some other guy. My family won't be able to take it. And it's my brother's best friend. Don't you think that you owe it to him to?" So she does this
blackmail in that.
She's really determined. So kind of what ensues is a war of wills and a war of attraction. And he tries to satisfy her by giving her the diary of a courtesan and saying, "Look, this should answer all your questions." Instead, she shows up at his house and says, "Chapter 15. So there's a lot of I write steamy, and this was a really fun opportunity to explore a lot of different things because she's demanding demonstrations on everything. And he doesn't want to, but I mean, my goodness, he doesn't want her doing it with like a groom or, so he convinces himself. He convinces himself he's doing everybody a favor, right? So anyway,
I must.
True love finds a way eventually, but they sure do have a good time getting to that point. So I think it's a good. I'm sad the series is over, but I think it will end on a high note. I think everyone will be satisfied. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. I know we were hoping for 7 deadly sins in the beginnings, but
like I said, if I had the foresight, the characters are so unusual and quirky, and so not mainstream Regency or I write more early Victorian, but I never thought that they would take off, but they did. It turns out people like strange characters. So
there's always cousins. There's always a pair of twin mysterious cousins that no one knew about.
Right. There's one in every family at least. So yeah, it was a great. It's been a lot of fun writing that series. A lot of fun.
Great. Well, what a lovely way to wrap it up. So that's part of Dragonblade's Flame line as well. So the only book that isn't Dragonblade Flame is Emily's book, and Emily's books are always
in it. Let's be clear.
Steamy. They're always steamy, and you have written for Flame.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was hoping we could talk about is what first of all, I love that Dragonblade differentiates so that you can pick your heat level. You can read Sweet Dreams, you can read originals, or you can read Flame. So you know going into what the parameters are for what matches up with your taste. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what sex does on the page for the characters and how you feel like it moves the story. Kathleen, for yours, if it wasn't there, it sounds like the story would not be there as well. Like that it's so much a part of how the characters know each other.
I don't do gratuitous, right? So every steamy scene to me is really more about the intimacy of the characters. And I have to be, I won't do sex unless it moves things forward and unless it's forming an attachment. And all of my characters who like to have sex, which all of them do, are chatty, right? So there's I do a lot of dialogue is my favorite thing to write. And so I do a lot of, they're always talking before, during, after, the whole bit. And so I want to make sure that not only is it witty and intimate, but it's also kind of fun, right? It can be super passionate, but also
Playful,
funny and strange, and you tripped over your pants or whatever happens. I believe that sex has its place, but it also has to move forward the story and the intimacy and the connection between the two individuals, because if you don't, the reader needs to feel that on the page. They need to read it and go, wow, I kind of would like that for myself, or reminds me of my relationship, or whatever it happens to be. Yeah.
Do you write the sex scenes in order when you're working your way through the book, or do you need to wait until you know the characters a little bit better?
So I write which is crazy. I write in a linear fashion. I don't know why I can't force myself to jump around. I've tried. I can't. I mean, I'm like, no, this has to come first. This has to, I have to do it. I'm so, controlling about I control my characters. No. But I will say that sometimes I'm just not in the mood to write a sex scene. So I just put a big block of letters that says sex. He touches her here. She touches him here. He does this to her, blah, 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 blah. And then I move on and write around it. And then I go back and fill it in.
Oh, I cannot do that. I can't do that. I tried once, and it was a complete
sometimes I'm just not in the mood.
It was a complete catastrophe. I'm like, okay, I'm not there, so I'm gonna leave it right there, and I'll come back tomorrow, because I tried it once. I put sex scene. So much there's the development of the relationship, and I never know in the sex what's gonna come out. I mean, because I'm not a plotter.
Okay.
So I don't even know how it's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to, one's going to be funny, one's going to be uncomfortable. I don't know until I have them in the room or outside or wherever they happen to be. But as they are having it, like, my characters do what they want, and then I try to make sense out of it as it happens.
Right.
So, and then they'll do things in the sex scene that are so their personality, because of who they are. Whether it's, in the next book in the series, she talks in soliloquies, so during, when things are happening, because that's who she is. It's that kind of thing. I had another one in the first Marrying Mabry with Stealing the Duke. She's a total intellectual. So she's like analyzing everything that's happening as it's happening, and until she can't anymore, which is a huge epiphany for her to go. So they grow as characters, but also the relationship grows. And so I did like I said, I did that once. I put, sex scene here, especially because my beta reader is my sister, and that's the only part of my book she doesn't read. She doesn't read anybody's sex scenes, but not mine, because I'm her sister, older sister. She doesn't want to know. So I blacked those out. And so I was like, oh, I was behind deadline. I'm like, I'll just write sex scene here, because she's not going to read anyway. Keep going with the story. But then going back to try to make that, and it was near the end, so everybody was, everything was together, and things were, there was no real major growth.
You knew who they were at that point.
Right. But it was so hard. I think I rewrote that 3 times, and I still wasn't happy with it.
Well, I think when you're a pantser too, because it sounds like I'm a total pantser, right? I have
so confuse me.
Just bite your tongue. Just bite it really hard.
I'm struggling right now just to try to outline a book, because I don't operate that way, right? I just kind of vomit it out, but I'm really struggling. But the sex, sometimes when I go back to the sex scene, it's a Friday afternoon, make myself a martini, have a couple of sips, then I'm in the mood. So yeah, sometimes you really have to think about it, and you have to know your characters as a pantser, you have to kind of go through the whole book, and then I go back and go, oh yeah, that's right.
That's who they are. That's how they would do this.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, I am a linear, so I cannot continue forward until I write the next.
Oh, okay. Well, I can skip. I can skip that part and come back and write it. But otherwise, the whole plot has to move in one direction, or I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get a little confused.
So I choreograph sex scenes a little bit like fight scenes in an action movie.
I did wonder about that.
So, because from my perspective, they're doing the same sort of thing. So, like in an action movie, a fight scene is going to show you loyalties, friendships, betrayal. You're fighting, how you fight. Do you trust the person next to you? Do you secretly want to be on the same side as the person opposite you? Your skills, your character, that all comes out in a fight scene. And if you take all the fight scenes out, it's usually an okay movie. It's just not an action movie. And I think it's the same for sex scenes. If you take all the sex scenes out of my novels, because they're not, most of them aren't the flame, like the super high heat, but they do have sex in them. They're still romances, but they're not steamy romances. And that's fine. If that's not your jam, that is totally fine. We are 3 authors. There are plenty of Dragonblade authors who write super sweet, super high emotion. And it's like, I read them. There's no judgment here. It's just that I prefer to write with a little bit of steam. Because I think that sex scenes are this incredible choreographed vehicle for personal character development, as well as interpersonal character development. I think a lot of my characters discover something about themselves through a sex scene, as well as build a connection or worry more about a connection sometimes. And so sometimes a sex scene can be a step back in the intimacy, not because of anyone's done anything wrong, but just because it reveals vulnerabilities that maybe that character wasn't aware of, or is very much pushed aside and tried to avoid. And so I think, because I am a plotter, I will say, like, okay, this intimacy,
so jealous.
Whether it's full sex or this is revealing this, or this prompts her to trust him in this way, or this means that he actually looks back at this situation and has more compassion for that person because he now understands it. So it helps me kind of work out what the sex is doing. I don't know a better way to put that.
And I think it has to do, I think in most cases, if you want the reader to be emotionally engaged, it has to do something more than just be sex on the page. It has to do more than just titillate. It has to in some way show you more intimacy in the characters or more of who they are.
Erotic romance exists because the focus is on the sex, and then there's a romance stringing the sex together. And again, no shade on that. If that's you, you do you. I read erotic romance. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about romance with erotic scenes or erotic encounters.
Yes.
It was Lexi said something about that she kept intellectualizing until the moment that she couldn't. And I think that moment is one of the things that sex on the page can do particularly well. It can show when a character finally gives in, like not just physically gives in, but really sees themselves as something different than what they were before, realizes that this is a person you can trust that way, or just, like touches you in a different kind of way.
There's few things so vulnerable as having sex with someone, especially for the first time with that person. Whether it's their first time or it's the first time with that person. And, some of our books will have the sex in chapter 1. And some of them will have it right at the end, and it'll be like something, a real slow burn that you've waited for, but it reveals something about the vulnerabilities of that person when it happens, no matter when it happens. And actually, some of the best books I've read, which have very steamy encounters in like chapter 2, the rest of the book is trying to rationalize and unpack and okay, I had this encounter with this person, and I was not expecting it to make me feel like this or think like this. And now I don't know who I am or what I want anymore. And all my motivations have changed, and all the conflict is different. So I think that there is some really interesting plot that you can do in sex scenes.
I will say I have a complaint about writing sex scenes in Regency. Too many virgins. Okay, too many virgins. In the first 3 books, I made sure one wasn't a virgin because I wasn't sure I could write a 3rd virgin in a row. And my curious ladies, I'm like, okay, they're curious. So they're not, hopefully all of them aren't going to have the hangups that most do. And some are not going to be virgins. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Deflowering a virgin on a daily basis is exhausting. I am traumatized in so many ways.
And I think this is perhaps the difference between Flame and original, is that in
We're
Flame,
getting t-shirts made that say deflowering a virgin on
In Flame, having both characters really open about their passions keeps the sparks really, really high, really exciting. Whereas I think with original, typically the heroine is a virgin, and it's more of an encounter between a hero who knows what he's doing, and she might be very, very curious and very open to it, but she is still inexperienced. And so there's an element of trust and an element of not teaching, sometimes there is, but the element of like, actually I can take you on this journey and you don't have to be worried that it's going to be painful. And actually that's a huge element, I think, in sex scenes, which are not the Flame element, but kind of middle ground original, of actually like sex is good and sex is enjoyable and sex is something that is enjoyed, but you don't know what you're doing. That's fine. I do. So let's crack on and I'll show you exactly what you're going to want. I think that's a very typical kind of original sort of flavor of style.
I think that.
Yeah, most of my young ladies are, if they're not a widow, I'm a big fan of widows, but if they're not a widow, or if they're not a spinster, because also love my spinsters, right? Because they experimented a little bit. They usually have a very progressive mother or an aunt or somebody who feels like a young lady should not go to the marital bed completely unknowing of what's going to happen. No fainting on your wedding night or anything like that, right?
Whereas again, with the originals, it's much more, you get more comedy in that because there's the unknown and because there's the, so exactly how does this, and I have a lot of older sisters who get married in the first few books who then sit down with younger sisters, and the younger sisters are like, that can't be true. That you're making that it doesn't happen like that. So I have a lot of fun with that because again, it's slightly lighter on the heat, so it's high kind of unknown comedy angle.
So there's got to be in Sinfully Wanton, Aunt Lottie, because she was a scandalous spinster herself and she had affairs and she still has lovers. I mean, I say her as elderly. She's probably my age, but back then that would have been elderly.
Different time, Kathleen.
She goes in, she doesn't go into detail, but she draws on napkins. She's kind of guided, but everybody says she's like the worst chaperone because she runs off if she sees a man that she once knew or once had a fling with. She's and Aurora says, well, if she has grass stains on her skirt, I know where Aunt Lottie's been. I mean, she's just right. So, but in addition to that, she's also very, okay, this is what happens and you shouldn't be afraid, so she's already kind of gotten rid of a lot of the fears. I always have that one character that's kind of wise that way and likes to make sure. Yeah.
And I think there's ways to play with it as well. So I've got in my Flame series, which is a Christmas series, the 12 Days of Christmas, I've got a family of 3 brothers and they're all their daughters. They've got 12 cousins who are all girls and they're all trying to marry them off. It's hijinks galore, my friends. But one is the head brother who lives in the country estate, like his daughters grow up within a landed estate. They have farms. They see how baby lambs get born and they work out where the ingredients go to bake the cake. Like they're innocent when they meet their, well, some of them are more innocent than others. Innocent-ish, innocent asterisk. But I have a scene where the hero is very astonished that she's worked this out and she's like, well, I'm not an idiot, like the farm is next door.
We've got cows. I've seen them.
How it's done and how it feels are 2 totally different things.
There we go.
Ladies, we could talk forever about this, and I'm thinking next time maybe we need to schedule more time.
But should we?
I actually think we should, because I think that a lot of times sex is so loaded that it can come across as
pun intended.
Yeah.
They're just, they jokes write themselves.
They do. I'm holding back because I don't want to. We're running out of time. I'm going to.
I am totally getting a deflowering virgins every day is exhausting T-shirt.
It is.
I need one of those. So. No, but I do think I think it's worth talking about, and I love that Dragonblade divides things up in a way that makes it very easy for you to choose what you want when you want it. Because the Sweet Dream authors have reasons for not including sex on the page, the same way as the Flame authors have reason for including it. So But ladies, it was a delight to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate your willingness to go a little over time. And I will say the same thing I say every week, because it's true every week, that Dragonblade books are the best deal on pre-order and release. And that if you don't get them on pre-order and release, you can read them in Kindle Unlimited, which means that if there's a long series, or if you're at the end of the series, which we are this week with two series, you can start at the beginning and read the whole way through, and you don't have to think about it. There's no bar to entry. So,
Yeah.
ladies, thanks again for taking the time. I really do
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Oh,
Thank